The topic for my multivariate presentation is Political Satisfaction under the Harper Government by Lisbon2012pol242. The basis for this report is the CES 2008 dataset with a total of 3,257 cases. The analytical approaches used for this analysis are multivariate regression analysis and Pearson's correlation. Research was conducted to investigate the relationship among the variables. Dr. Armin Schaefer finds that satisfaction with democracy tends to increase in accordance with economic performance. When citizens view the economy as doing relatively well, there is higher satisfaction for the current government. Furthermore, recent Canadian polls suggest that 50% of Canadians disapprove of Harper, most harshly judged by Atlantic Canadians, Quebecers, and British Columbians. Canadians are not agreeing with the current state of federal policies and do not see any benefits. The focus is that Canadians are feeling that they are not being fully represented with the current federal government. Finally, research by Samara Canada finds that Canadian satisfaction with democracy is at an all-time low at 55%. The rationale. As you can see then, Canadian satisfaction with government performance, especially under Stephen Harper, has been shifting. Satisfaction with Canadian democracy under the Harper government is at an all-time low, with only 55% of respondents satisfied, down from 75% satisfaction in 2004. I will now look at some potential factors responsible for this decrease in public satisfaction. The dependent variable being used is question I0 from the CES study. The question reads, how satisfied are you with the performance of the federal government under Harper? Citizens are able to respond with very satisfied, fairly satisfied, not very satisfied, and not satisfied at all. Recodes were not needed for this variable, and the response don't know and refused were declared missing. My first independent variable measures respondents' view on whether the policies of the federal government has made the Canadian economy better or not so much of a difference. My second independent variable measures the respondents' views on whether federal policies overall have made you better off or not so much of a difference. Lastly, my third independent variable measures respondents' overall satisfaction with democracy. Expanding on my previous research, the following hypotheses were made. Hypothesis 1. The more prosperous citizens see the state of the economy, the higher their satisfaction with the current federal government under Harper. The same is true if citizens view weak economic performance, blaming weak federal policies on the government. The second hypothesis states that when citizens are facing any type of increase in their standard of living or benefits, this will boost their satisfaction with government under Harper, while a decrease in beneficial policies decreases satisfaction and shifts the blame to the current federal government. The third and final hypothesis states that citizens who are satisfied with democracy in Canada will support and continue to be happy with the current federal government under Harper, while those who are dissatisfied blame their political representatives and federal government for poor representation and performance. A correlation matrix was run to see if there were any interrelationships between the independent variables that could potentially affect our relationship with the higher than 0.2 Pearson's R-score. As you can see, all three independent variables resulted in an R-score higher than 0.3, meaning that there is some strong explanatory power in the independent variables over the dependent variable. There is also a strong enough relationship between the variables to deem them important and not worrisomely strong, as they do not measure the same item. Furthermore, my Pearson R values are all positive, confirming my hypotheses that the higher the views over beneficial economic policies, over benefits from policies, and satisfaction with democracy leads to higher levels of satisfaction with government under Harper. My statistical significance between my independent and dependent variables resulted in a score of 0.000, meaning they were not due to chance. My satisfaction with democracy variable explains 13% variation in my dependent variable. The federal economic policies variable explains 10% variation in satisfaction with the federal government's performance under Harper, and the overall benefit of federal policies variable explains a 9% variation in my dependent variable. It appears that overall satisfaction with democracy with an R-square score of 0.3611 holds the strongest relationship with my dependent variable. A multiple regression analysis was conducted to determine the effects of each independent variable. Several conclusions can be drawn from these results. Firstly, the significance on a whole indicated by the score of 0.000 represents the findings are not due to chance. The B-scores indicate that my results are in line with my hypotheses. The B-scores mark positive impacts on satisfaction of government under Harper for my three variables. The beta scores show that when controlling for other variables, effectiveness of satisfaction with democracy is the greatest influence on my dependent variable with a score of 0.2754, while effectiveness of federal economic policies having some effect with a score of 2229, and with federal policies on citizen benefit the least effective at 0.1350. My tolerance levels yielded high scores close to the value of 1, representing the fact that my independent variables are unrelated to one another. This avoids the issue of multicollinearity. The adjusted R-score score explains that these three independent variables explain 17% variance in my dependent variable. Overall, my independent variables may not have explained as much variance as I could have hoped for. It appears that the overall level of satisfaction with democracy appears to be the strongest predictor for the satisfaction with the federal government under Harper. Therefore, the findings to my regression analysis shows that the levels of satisfaction with democracy have the greatest influence over satisfaction with the federal government under Harper. Furthermore, my positive value indicates positive relationships between my independent and dependent variables. My three hypotheses were confirmed in having some effect on my dependent variable. It appears that the overall satisfaction with democracy is the greatest predictor in explaining variance in my dependent variable. Furthermore, the higher effectiveness of federal economic policies, policies which created some personal benefit, and satisfaction with democracy directly correlated with an increase in satisfaction with the federal government under Harper. The opposite holds true as well for declining satisfaction. Although these variables do not fully explain variance in my dependent variable, they are still relevant in providing some valid factors that are responsible for change in public satisfaction with the federal government under Stephen Harper. The strongest relationship that emerges is that the more the public are satisfied with democracy, the more satisfied is the public with the federal government under Harper. That is not to say that my other two variables are not relevant. These results are relative to my literature in the sense that a relationship exists between economic performance and satisfaction for the federal government. As Armin Schaefer suggested, the more positively someone sees the economy performing, the higher dissatisfaction with the federal government will be. As Canadians increasingly disapprove federal policies, this can be shown through the suggested 50% of Canadians who now harshly judge the federal government's performance under Harper. Thirdly, as Canadian satisfaction is at an all-time low of 55%, this does directly translate to disapproval of the federal government under Harper, as satisfaction with democracy demonstrates the greatest relationship with my dependent variable.